Why is everyone in America so tired all the time? Seriously, pause for a second and look around. It doesn't matter if you're in a bustling New York office, a quiet suburb, in Ohio, or a college campus in California. Fatigue everywhere. You wake up groggy, drag yourself through the day, and collapse at night, only to repeat the cycle again. And it's not just you. Your co-workers, your friends, your family, everyone's running on empty, clutching their coffee cups like lifelines, joking about needing a nap before noon. But here's the unsettling truth. This wasn't always the American way. Think back just a few generations. Our grandparents and great-grandparents built this country with their hands. They worked long hours in factories, on farms, in steel mills and shipyards. Their days were filled with physical labor, yet somehow they still had the energy to come home, cook dinner, play with their kids, and even go out dancing on a Friday night. They didn't have energy drinks, smartwatches, or meditation apps. So what changed? Why does it feel like, despite all our modern conveniences, we're more exhausted than ever? Some people blame the hustle culture that's taken over American life, the idea that you have to be grinding 24/7 just to keep up. Others point to the endless stream of bad news, social media drama, and the pressure to always be on. But the real answer is more complicated, and maybe even more disturbing, because if you look at the numbers, Americans are sleeping less, moving less, and reporting higher levels of stress and burnout than at any point in history. The CDC calls it a public health crisis. Doctors are seeing more patients with unexplained fatigue, anxiety, and brain fog. And yet, when the tests come back, everything looks normal. So what's really going on? Why are we, in the land of opportunity and innovation, so completely drained? The answer isn't just about sleep or work or even technology. It's about something deeper, something that's changed in the way we live, think, and rest. And if you've ever wondered why you're always tired, even when you do everything right, you're about to discover a truth that could change everything you thought you knew about energy. Fatigue has become the silent epidemic of modern America. It's woven into the fabric of our daily lives, so much so that most people barely question it anymore. We joke about being permanently tired, but beneath the humor is a real sense of frustration and confusion. How did we get here? How did exhaustion become the new normal in a country that once prided itself on boundless energy and optimism? To understand this, you have to look at how American life has changed over the past century. In the early 1900s, the average American's day was defined by physical movement. People walked to work, did manual labor, and spent time outdoors. Even in cities, there was a rhythm to life that allowed for real breaks, lunch hours spent away from the desk, evenings on the porch, Sundays reserved for rest. There was a clear line between work and home, effort and relaxation. And while life was far from easy, there was a sense of balance that kept people going. Fast forward to today, and that balance has all but disappeared. The boundaries between work and home have blurred, especially after the rise of remote work and the always-on culture fueled by smartphones and laptops. Now, your boss can email you at midnight, and you're expected to respond. Your friends can text you during dinner, and you feel guilty if you don't reply right away. Even your downtime is filled with notifications, news alerts, and endless scrolling. The American dream has quietly shifted from work hard, play hard to work always, rest never. This constant state of alertness is taking a toll. According to the American Psychological Association, stress levels in the U.S. have reached historic highs, with nearly 80% of adults reporting symptoms like headaches, fatigue, and trouble sleeping. The World Health Organization has even classified burnout as an occupational phenomenon, and American workers are among the most affected. It's not just adults. Either teenagers and college students are reporting record levels of exhaustion, anxiety, and sleep deprivation. What is even more alarming is that this epidemic of tiredness isn't just about working long hours. In fact, studies show that Americans today actually spend less time on physical labor than previous generations. Yet, we feel more drained than ever. The culprit, it, is the relentless mental load, the never-ending to-do lists, the pressure to keep up, the fear of missing out, and the constant barrage of information. Our brains are working overtime, processing more data in a single day than our grandparents did in a week. And while technology was supposed to make life easier, It has often made it harder to truly disconnect. The average American now spends over 7 hours a day looking at screens. We, bombarded with more choices, more decisions, and more distractions than any generation before us. The result is a kind of chronic fatigue that no amount of sleep or coffee can fix. This is the new American epidemic, a nation of people who are always tired, always wired, and always searching for the next quick fix. But what if the real solution isn't another energy drink or productivity hack? What if the answer lies in rediscovering something we've lost, a way of living that restores energy instead of draining it? The truth is, the path out of this fatigue epidemic might be hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to remember how to truly rest. If you want to pinpoint the real culprit behind America of exhaustion, you don't have to look much further than the device in your hand. Digital overload has quietly become the most powerful force shaping our energy, our focus, and even our sense of self. It's not just about being busy, it's about being constantly plugged in, constantly stimulated, and never truly alone with your own thoughts. And while the United States has always been a nation of early adopters, our love affair with technology has come with a hidden cost that few people saw coming. Think about how your day begins. For millions of Americans, the first thing they do isn't stretch or savor a quiet moment. It's reach for their phone. Before you've even had your first sip of coffee, you're bombarded with notifications, emails from work, texts from friends, breaking news alerts, and a flood of social media updates. Your brain is forced into high gear before you've even left your bed. This isn't just a personal habit, it's a cultural shift. In the 1950s, the average American household had one television and families gathered around it for a single evening program. Today, every person has a screen in their pocket and the content never stops. The numbers are staggering. According to recent studies, the average American checks their phone over 350 times a day. That's once every 3 minutes. We're not just talking about teenagers. Either adults, parents, and even seniors are caught in the same cycle. The constant pings and vibrations create a sense of urgency that's hard to ignore. Every notification feels important. Every message demands a response. Over time, this relentless digital noise rewires the brain, making it harder to focus, harder to relax, and almost impossible to truly rest. But the problem goes deeper than just distraction. The American workplace has been transformed by technology for better and for worse. Tools like email, Slack, and Zoom were supposed to make us more efficient, but instead, they've created a culture of multitasking and constant interruption. You're expected to juggle multiple conversations, projects, and deadlines at once, all while keeping up with a never-ending stream of information. The result? Chronic mental fatigue. Your brain is like a computer with too many tabs open. Eventually, it starts to slow down, glitch, and crash. Yet, when people finally reach their breaking point and seek help, the answers are rarely satisfying. You go to the doctor, get your blood work done, check your thyroid, your vitamin levels, your sleep patterns. Everything comes back normal. The doctor might tell you it's just stress, or maybe you need to get more rest. But how do you rest when your mind is still racing, when your phone is still buzzing, when the world never seems to pause? This is the paradox of modern American life. We have more tools, more information, and more ways to connect than ever before, but we are lonelier, more anxious, and more exhausted. The digital revolution promised to free us from drudgery, but instead, it has trapped us in a cycle of constant stimulation and chronic fatigue. And the scariest part, most of us don't even realize it is happening. We've accepted this digital overload as the new normal, even as it quietly drains our energy and steals our peace of mind. But what if there's another way? What if the key to breaking free from this cycle isn't about giving up technology altogether, but about learning how to use it without letting it use us? The first step is recognizing the hidden cost of digital overload and daring to imagine a life where your mind can finally rest. Rest used to be simple in America. There was a time when taking it easy meant exactly that: sitting on the porch as the sun set, chatting with neighbors, or simply letting your mind wander while you watched the world go by. Sundays were sacred, not just for religious reasons, but because they were a day when the entire country seemed to slow down. Stores closed early, families gathered for dinner, and the pace of life shifted into something gentler, more humane. Rest was built into the rhythm of American life. and it was respected as a necessity, not a luxury. But somewhere along the way, the meaning of rest got lost. In today's America, even our downtime is filled with activity. We binge-watch entire seasons of TV in a weekend, scroll endlessly through social media, and fill every quiet moment with podcasts, YouTube videos, or the latest viral trend. The living room, once a place for conversation and connection, has become a second office or a personal entertainment center. The line between work and leisure has blurred so much that many people can't remember the last time they truly did nothing. This is the paradox of rest in the digital age. We are constantly seeking relaxation, but the ways we try to unwind often leave us feeling even more drained. The average American spends more than 4 hours a day watching television and another 3 hours on their phone. That is more time than most people spent sleeping a century ago. And yet, despite all this rest, we are more tired than ever. Why? Because our brains never get a real break. The constant stream of information, images, and noise keeps our minds in a state of low-level alertness, making it impossible to fully recharge. It's not just adults who are caught in this trap. American children and teenagers are growing up in a world where boredom is almost extinct. Every spare moment is filled with screens, games, and notifications. The result? Rising rates of anxiety, attention problems, and sleep disorders. Pediatricians are sounding the alarm, warning that kids need unstructured time to daydream, to play, to simply be. But in a culture that values productivity above all else, even rest has become something to optimize, track, and measure. The irony is that the more we chase relaxation through stimulation, the further we get from real rest. Scrolling through Instagram or watching TikTok videos might feel like a break, but it's actually just another form of mental work. Your brain is still processing, still reacting, still on guard. True rest, the kind that leaves you feeling refreshed and alive, requires something different. It requires space, silence, and the willingness to step away from the noise. Historically, Americans understood this intuitively. The concept of taking a breather wasn't just a figure of speech, it was a way of life. People took walks after dinner, sat quietly in parks, or simply stared out the window during a long train ride. These moments of stillness weren't wasted time, they were essential for mental and emotional health. But as the pace of life accelerated and technology invaded every corner of our existence, these quiet moments became rare, even suspicious. Doing nothing started to feel like laziness, and the pressure to always be on became the new normal. Now many Americans find themselves in a strange predicament. They want to rest, they know they need to rest, but they've forgotten how. Even when the opportunity arises, an empty afternoon, a quiet evening at home, the urge to fill the silence is overwhelming. The idea of sitting still without a screen or a soundtrack feels uncomfortable, even unsettling. We've become so accustomed to stimulation that true rest feels foreign, almost impossible. But here is the truth. Real rest isn't about escaping from life, but about reconnecting with it. About giving your mind and body the space to recover, to process, to heal. And while it might feel unfamiliar at first, it's a skill that can be relearned. The first step is recognizing that the way we rest now isn't working, and daring to imagine a different way. Because if we want to break free from the cycle of exhaustion, we have to rediscover what it really means to rest, not just for a moment, but for a lifetime. So what are these ancient Japanese practices that seem to hold the secret to restoring energy in a world that never stops? And why do they matter so much for Americans right now in the middle of our own fatigue epidemic? The answer isn't just about adopting foreign customs. It's about rediscovering something universal, something that once existed in American life but has been buried under decades of busyness and distraction. Let's start with the first practice, Sejaku, the art of active stillness. In Japan, this isn't just about sitting quietly. It's about creating intentional moments of silence in a noisy world. The samurai practiced Sejaku before battle, not to empty their minds, but to sharpen their awareness and prepare for action. In modern neuroscience, this state is known as activating the default mode network, a kind of mental reset button that allows the brain to process emotions, consolidate memories, and clear out mental clutter. Americans once had their own version of this. Think of the quiet moments after dinner, when families would sit together without the TV blaring, or the peaceful solitude of a fisherman on a lake at dawn. These moments weren't wasted time, they were essential for recharging the mind and spirit. Today, Sejaku can be as simple as sitting in your backyard for 10 minutes, without your phone, just listening to the world around you. It's a practice that costs nothing but can change everything. The second practice is Shinrin Yoku, or forest bathing. This isn't about hiking for exercise or conquering a mountain trail. It's about immersing yourself in nature, letting your senses take in the sights, sounds, and smells of the natural world. In the 1980s, Japanese researchers discovered that spending time in forests lowered stress hormones, boosted immune function, and improved mood. The American landscape is filled with parks, forests, and green spaces, but how often do we truly experience them? In the past, American families would spend Sundays at the park, children would play in the woods until sunset, and city dwellers would escape to the countryside for a breath of fresh air. Today, even when we visit nature, we're often distracted taking selfies, checking messages, or rushing through the experience. Shinrin Yoku invites us to slow down, to simply be present, and to let nature do its quiet work of healing. Even a short walk in a local park without headphones or screens can have a profound effect on your energy and well-being. The third practice is Inemuri, the art of strategic napping. In Japan, it's common to see people napping on trains, in offices, or even in public spaces. These aren't long, indulgent naps, but short, purposeful breaks, usually 10 to 20 minutes that allow the brain to reset and the body to recover. In America, napping has long been stigmatized, associated with laziness or lack of ambition, but history tells a different story. Thomas Edison, one of America's greatest inventors, was famous for his power naps. So was Eleanor Roosevelt, who would take short rests before important speeches. Modern science now confirms what these high achievers knew intuitively. A brief nap can boost alertness, improve memory, and enhance creativity. Inemuri isn't about escaping your responsibilities, it's about giving yourself permission to pause, so you can return to your day with renewed energy. What ties these three practices together is their simplicity and accessibility. You don't need expensive equipment, special training, or a trip to Japan to benefit from them. You just need the willingness to step away from the noise, to reclaim moments of quiet, and to honor your body's natural rhythms. In a country as vast and diverse as the United States, these practices can be adapted to any lifestyle, whether you live in a bustling city, a quiet suburb, or a rural town. But perhaps the most important lesson is this: energy isn't something you can force or manufacture with more caffeine, more hustle, or more willpower. It's something you cultivate by respecting the balance between activity and rest, stimulation and stillness, connection and solitude. The ancient Japanese understood this, and so did generations of Americans before us. The path to renewed energy isn't about doing more, it's about doing less, with greater intention. As America faces a crossroads caught between the promise of endless productivity and the reality of widespread exhaustion, these three ancient practices offer a way forward. They remind us that the answers we seek aren't always new or high-tech. Sometimes the most powerful solutions are the ones that bring us back to ourselves, to nature, and to the quiet wisdom that has been there all along. To truly understand how these ancient practices can transform a life, let us look at a story that could belong to almost anyone in America today. Caleb's story isn't just about one man, it's a reflection of what millions of Americans are experiencing right now from coast to coast. Caleb grew up in the Midwest, in a small town where life moved at a slower pace. As a kid, he spent his summers riding bikes with friends, fishing in the local creek, and helping his grandfather tend a backyard garden. Back then, rest was natural. Evenings were spent on the porch, listening to crickets, and weekends meant family barbecues or trips to the county fair. But as Caleb grew older, the world changed, and so did he. After college, Caleb moved to a big city, chasing the American dream. He landed a job as a systems analyst at a fast-growing tech company. The pay was good, the benefits were solid, and the future looked bright, but the pace was relentless. His days started before sunrise, checking emails in bed, and ended long after dark, with his laptop glowing in the living room. Coffee became his constant companion, and weekends disappeared into a blur of errands, chores, and more screen time. The porch swings and quiet nights of his childhood felt like distant memories. At first, Caleb thought his exhaustion was just part of growing up. Everyone around him seemed tired too. His co-workers joked about living on caffeine and running on fumes. But as the months turned into years, the fatigue deepened. He started waking up tired, no matter how much he slept. His workouts felt impossible, and even simple pleasures like cooking dinner with his wife, Clarice, became chores. The spark in his marriage began to fade, replaced by short answers and long silences. Clarice noticed the change. She missed the man who used to laugh easily, who had energy for adventures and late-night talks. She tried to help, suggesting vacations, date nights, even therapy, but nothing seemed to work. One evening, after another silent dinner, Clarice sat beside Caleb on the couch and gently took his phone from his hand. "I can't stand seeing you like this anymore," she said. "You're here, but you're not really here. We want to start a family, but how can we when you're always so tired?" Her words hit him harder than any deadline or performance review ever could. For the first time, Caleb admitted to himself that something was deeply wrong. He made an appointment with a doctor, hoping for a simple fix, a vitamin deficiency, maybe, or a new medication. But after a battery of tests, the results were all the same. "You're healthy. It's just stress. Try to rest." But how do you rest when you've forgotten how? How do you find peace in a world that never stops? Desperate for answers, Caleb stumbled across an article about Japanese energy practices Sejaku, Shinrin Yoku, and Inemuri. At first, it sounded almost too simple, even a little strange. But something about the idea of intentional stillness, time in nature, and short, restorative naps resonated with the memories of his childhood. He remembered the calm of the creek, the quiet of the porch, the way a short nap after lunch could make the whole day feel new. With nothing left to lose, Caleb decided to try. He started small, 10 minutes of silence each morning, sitting by the window with his coffee, no phone, no distractions. Twice a week, he walked in the city park, leaving his headphones at home. And after lunch, he allowed himself a short nap, just 15 minutes, before returning to work. The changes did happen overnight. The first week was hard. His mind raced, his body resisted, and the urge to check his phone was almost unbearable. But slowly something shifted. By the second week, Caleb noticed he was sleeping better. He woke up feeling a little more refreshed, a little less anxious. His focus at work improved, and the afternoon crashes became less severe. Most importantly, he started to reconnect with Clarice. They cooked together, talked about their dreams, and even planned a weekend getaway, something they hadn't done in years. Caleb's story is uniquely American, shaped by the pressures and possibilities of life in the United States. But it also universal. The story of what happens when we lose touch with the rhythm of rest and renewal, and the hope that comes from finding our way back. For Caleb, the answer wasn't another prescription or productivity hack. It was a return to practices that honored both his heritage and his humanity, a reminder that sometimes the best way forward is to rediscover what we've left behind. Caleb's journey back to energy and clarity did happen overnight. Like so many Americans, he was skeptical at first. After all, the culture he grew up in taught him that solutions had to be complicated, high-tech, or expensive to be effective. But as he began to experiment with the three ancient practices, Sejaku, Shinrin Yoku, and Inemuri, he discovered that real transformation often starts with the simplest changes. The first week was the hardest. Caleb's mornings, once dominated by a frantic scroll through emails and news, now began with 10 minutes of intentional silence. At first, it felt awkward, even pointless. His mind raced with to-do lists and worries, and the urge to reach for his phone was almost physical. But he stuck with it, remembering the quiet mornings of his childhood in the Midwest when the world seemed to pause before the day began. Slowly, he started to notice a difference. The silence wasn't empty, it was restorative. It gave his mind a chance to settle, to process, to breathe. Twice a week, Caleb made time for Shinrin Yoku, or forest bathing. Living in a bustling American city, he did have access to ancient Japanese forests, but he did have a city park filled with old oaks and winding trails. He left his headphones at home and let himself wander, paying attention to the rustle of leaves, the chirping of birds, the feel of the breeze on his skin. At first, he felt self-conscious, like he was wasting time. But as the weeks passed, these walks became a sanctuary, a place where he could escape the constant noise and reconnect with something deeper. He remembered stories his grandfather told him about growing up on a farm, how a simple walk in the fields could clear his head and lift his spirits. Caleb realized that this connection to nature was part of his own American heritage too. The third practice, Inemuri, or strategic napping, was perhaps the most surprising. In the American workplace, napping is often seen as a sign of laziness or weakness, but Caleb decided to challenge that stigma. Every afternoon after lunch, he set a timer for 15 minutes and allowed himself to rest. Sometimes he dozed off, sometimes he just closed his eyes and let his thoughts drift. Either way, he found that these short breaks left him feeling more alert and focused for the rest of the day. He remembered reading about famous Americans like Thomas Edison and Eleanor Roosevelt who swore by power naps. Maybe they were onto something after all. As the days turned into weeks, the changes in Caleb's life became more noticeable. He started sleeping more deeply at night, waking up with a sense of renewal he hadn't felt in years. His productivity at work improved, not because he was working longer hours, but because he was working with greater focus and clarity. The constant brain fog began to lift, replaced by a sense of calm and control. Even his relationships improved. He found himself more present with Clarice, more patient and engaged. They laughed together, cooked meals, and talked about their future with a sense of hope that had been missing for far too long. What made Caleb's transformation so powerful was not just the practices themselves, but the mindset shift they inspired. He stopped seeing rest as a reward for hard work and started seeing it as a foundation for everything else. He realized that energy isn't something you can force or fake it, something you have to cultivate, protect, and respect. This was a radical idea in a country that often equates busyness with success, but it was exactly what he needed. Caleb's story is a reminder that change is possible, even in a culture that seems determined to keep us running on empty. By embracing practices that honor both ancient wisdom and modern science, he found a way to break free from the cycle of exhaustion and rediscover the energy, focus, and joy that had been missing from his life. His journey is uniquely American, shaped by the pressures and possibilities of life in the United States, but it's also a universal story of hope, resilience, and the power of returning to what truly matters. As Caleb's life began to shift, he started to notice something that went far beyond the practices themselves. It wasn't just about adding moments of stillness, nature, or rest into his day. It was about understanding where his energy was actually going. For the first time, he saw that his exhaustion wasn't simply the result of not getting enough sleep or working too hard. It was the product of countless, invisible energy leaks that had crept into his life, a phenomenon that has quietly become a defining feature of modern American existence. Historically, Americans have always prided themselves on their work ethic. From the pioneers who settled the frontier to the factory workers who powered the Industrial Revolution, the idea of giving it your all was woven into the national identity. But there was also an understanding that energy was precious and that it had to be managed wisely. Farmers rose with the sun and rested when it set. Factory shifts were balanced with union-mandated breaks. Even in the Roaring Twenties, with all its hustle and innovation, there was still time for Sunday picnics, church socials, and front porch conversations. Today, the landscape looks very different. The American workday has stretched far beyond the traditional 9 to 5, thanks to smartphones and remote work. The expectation to be available at all hours has become the norm, and the pressure to keep up professionally, socially, even recreationally never lets up. But the real drain isn't just the hours we put in, it's the way our attention is constantly fractured. Every notification, every email, every urgent message is a tiny leak, siphoning off a bit of our mental energy. Over time, these leaks add up, leaving us feeling depleted even when we haven't done anything physically demanding. Caleb realized that his own energy leaks came from more than just work. They came from the endless comparisons on social media, the pressure to respond instantly to every text, the habit of worrying about things he could control. He saw how much energy he wasted on multitasking, trying to juggle work, home, and personal life all at once, never fully present in any of them. He remembered how his grandfather used to focus on one thing at a time, whether it was fixing a fence or telling a story, and how much more satisfying and energizing that seemed. There, a growing body of research in America that backs up what Caleb discovered. Psychologists have found that multitasking actually reduces productivity and increases fatigue. Neuroscientists warn that constant digital stimulation keeps the brain in a state of hypervigilance, making it harder to relax and recover. Even the language we use, burnout, information overload, decision fatigue, reflects a culture that is leaking energy at every turn. But the most profound lesson Caleb learned was that energy leaks aren't just mental, they are physical and emotional. 2. Poor posture at a desk, shallow breathing, and lack of movement all sap physical vitality. Unresolved conflicts, unspoken worries, and the stress of trying to meet everyone. Expectations drain emotional reserves. In the past, American communities provided natural buffers against these leaks. Neighbors looked out for each other, families ate together, and there was a sense of shared responsibility. Today, as more people live alone and communities become more fragmented, those buffers are weaker and the leaks are harder to plug. The good news is that once you start to see where your energy is going, you can begin to reclaim it. Caleb learned to set boundaries with his devices, to say no to unnecessary commitments, and to focus on what truly mattered. He practiced being present, whether he was working, spending time with Clarice, or simply enjoying a walk in the park. He discovered that by plugging the leaks, by protecting his attention, his body, and his emotions, he need more energy. He just needed to stop wasting what he already had. This deeper lesson is one that resonates far beyond Caleb's story. It's a call to all Americans to rethink the way we live, work, and rest. The path to renewed energy isn't about doing more, but about doing less, more intentionally. It's about honoring the wisdom of the past, embracing the science of the present, and daring to imagine a future where energy is cultivated, not consumed. In a country built on the promise of possibility, maybe the greatest possibility of all is learning how to keep what matters most from slipping away. 4 months after Caleb first decided to reclaim his energy, his life looked completely different. The transformation was dramatic in the way Hollywood might script it. There were no overnight miracles, no sudden windfalls. Instead, it was a quiet, steady return to himself, a process that echoed the rhythms of American life before the age of constant distraction. The changes were subtle at first. Deeper sleep, clearer focus, a sense of calm that lingered even on busy days. But over time, these small shifts added up to something much bigger. Caleb found himself waking up with genuine anticipation for the day ahead. He no longer reached for his phone before his feet hit the floor. Instead, he started each morning with a few minutes of silence, watching the sunrise from his apartment window, an echo of the peaceful dawns he remembered from his childhood in the Midwest. His walks in the park became a cherished ritual, a time to reconnect with nature and with himself. Even his short afternoon naps, once a source of guilt, became a secret weapon for productivity and creativity. The impact on his relationships was just as profound. Clarice noticed the difference almost immediately. The man who once came home exhausted and irritable was now present, engaged, and eager to share the details of his day. They cooked together, laughed together, and began to dream again about the future. When they learned they were expecting their first child, it felt like a new chapter, not just for their family, but for the way they wanted to live. Caleb knew he wanted to pass on these lessons to his child, that energy is precious, that rest is sacred, and that life is meant to be lived fully, not just endured. Caleb's story is a reminder that the American dream was never just about working harder or achieving more. It was about building a life that balanced ambition with well-being, progress with peace. For generations, Americans understood that rest was not a sign of weakness, but a source of strength. From the Sabbath traditions of early settlers to the Union victories that secure weekends and lunch breaks, the right to rest has always been part of the nation's fabric. Somewhere along the way, that wisdom got lost in the noise of modern life, but it's not gone forever. If you are watching this and recognizing yourself in Caleb's story, you are not alone. Millions of Americans are feeling the same exhaustion, the same sense of running on empty. The good news is that you don't need a radical overhaul or a plane ticket to Japan to start feeling better. The practices that helped Caleb Sejaku, Shinrin Yoku, and Inemuri are available to anyone, anywhere. You can begin tomorrow: 10 minutes of quiet in the morning, an hour in a local park each week, a short nap after lunch. These aren't just habits. They are acts of reclaiming your life from the grip of constant stimulation and endless demands. But the real challenge is deeper. It's about changing the way we think about energy, rest, and what it means to live well. It is about rejecting the myth that exhaustion is a badge of honor, and embracing the truth that you are more creative, more resilient, and more alive when you honor your need for renewal. It is about remembering that the most important things in life, connection, joy, purpose, can be found in a flurry of activity, but in the quiet moments when you allow yourself to simply be. So, are you ready for a change? Are you willing to step off the treadmill of endless busyness and rediscover the power of true rest? The path is simple, but it requires courage, the courage to slow down, to unplug, to listen to your own needs. If you try these practices for just 30 days, you might be surprised by what you find. Not just more energy, but a deeper sense of clarity, fulfillment, and peace. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below about your own experiences with fatigue and renewal. Let us start a conversation about what it means to live well in America today, not just for ourselves, but for the next generation. Because the truth is, energy isn't something you force or fake. It's something you cultivate, protect, and pass on. And in a country built on hope and possibility, that might just be the most powerful legacy of all.